The silence in the house was no longer the peaceful quiet of a Saturday morning, it was the heavy, suffocating silence of a tomb. Clara stood in the doorway of the master bedroom, watching the man she had loved for 20 years systematically erase himself from her life. Mark wasn't just packing, he was performing a surgical extraction. He didn't look at the framed photos on the dresser, the ones of their honeymoon in Tuscany or the grainy Polaroid from the night he passed the bar exam. He only looked at his reflection in the mirror as he adjusted the collar of a new, slim-fit linen shirt that Clara hadn't bought for him. "You don't have to do this today, Mark," Clara said, her voice sounding thin and foreign to her own ears. "We could talk. We could at least go to mediation before you move into that place." Mark pulled the zipper on a leather suitcase, a sleek, designer piece that looked far too expensive for a man who claimed he was starting over. He finally looked at her, but his eyes were like two polished stones. There was no grief in them, only a restless, flickering impatience. "We've talked, Clara. For years, we've just been orbiting each other," he said, using that tone he reserved for difficult clients, calm, condescending, and final. "Chloe makes me feel like I'm actually living. She has this energy, this spark. She doesn't look at me and see a middle-aged lawyer with a mortgage. She sees me." Clara felt a bitter laugh bubble up in her throat. "She sees a man with a partner-track salary and a midlife crisis, Mark. I saw the man who slept on a floor with me when we were too poor to buy a bed. I saw the man who cried when his father died. I didn't orbit you. I built the damn galaxy you live in." Mark winced, but only for a second. He checked his watch, a new, high-tech smartwatch that probably tracked his heart rate and vibes. "My Porsche's in the shop getting the detailing done," he said, changing the subject with a practiced pivot. "And the trunk is too small for these bags anyway. I need you to drive me over to the downtown loft in your SUV. It'll be faster." The request was a slap in the face. He wasn't just leaving her, he wanted her to act as his moving van to the doorstep of his new life. For a moment, Clara considered saying no. She considered throwing his suitcases off the balcony. But a weary, bone-deep dignity took over. She wanted him out. If driving him was the fastest way to stop breathing the same air as him, she would do it. "Fine," she whispered. "Get your things." The walk to the garage felt like a funeral procession. Clara climbed into the driver's seat of her charcoal gray SUV, the car they had bought together because it was safe for future kids that never came because Mark was always too busy chasing the next promotion. Now, the back was filled with the relics of his vanity, bespoke suits, Italian shoes, and a box of expensive whiskeys. As they pulled out of the driveway of their suburban colonial, Mark didn't look back at the rose bushes Clara had spent 3 summers tending. He was busy on his phone, his thumb flying across the screen. Clara caught a glimpse of the notifications, a string of heart emojis and messages from Chloe Yoga about manifesting their shared space. 10 minutes into the drive, Mark let out an annoyed huff. "Stop at that 7-11 up ahead. I need some water and, I don't know, something to settle my stomach. Moving is stressful, Clara." "Stressful for you?" she thought, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. She pulled into the neon-lit gas station. Mark hopped out, leaving the door ajar. Through the glass storefront, Clara watched him. He looked like a stranger, his hair styled in a trendy, youthful way that didn't quite suit his receding hairline, his posture forced and rigid. He grabbed a bottle of alkaline water and then lingered at the counter. She saw him point at the lottery display, laughing with the clerk as he tucked a slip of paper into his pocket. He climbed back into the car, smelling of the humid afternoon air and a new, citrusy cologne that Chloe probably liked. "Bought a Powerball ticket," he said, a smug grin touching his lips. "Chloe says I'm in a high abundance cycle right now. It's the biggest jackpot in years. If I win this, I'm taking her to a villa in Tuscany. A real one. Not like that drafty Airbnb we stayed at 10 years ago. Clara felt a physical pang in her chest. Tuscany had been their dream. She had spent weeks planning that trip, saving every penny from her first architecture firm bonus. To hear him offer it up to a 23-year-old yoga instructor as a high abundance gift felt like having her memories set on fire. "Just tell me where to turn," she said, her voice cold as ice. They reached the downtown district, a place of glass towers and overpriced coffee shops. Mark directed her to a high-rise bachelor pad that screamed trying too hard. The lobby was filled with industrial art and 20-somethings in athleisure. Clara pulled up to the curb. She didn't park, she just kept the engine idling, a low growl beneath their feet. Mark stepped out and began hauling his bags onto the sidewalk. He looked at the SUV, then at Clara. "The lease is in your name, so you keep the car," he said, as if he were being incredibly generous. "I'll send a courier for the rest of my books next week. Let's keep this clean, okay? No drama. I've already had my lawyer draft a quick claim settlement for the house and assets. I've signed it. You just need to sign and notarize it. I just want a clean break, Clara. No alimony, no messy fights. Just what's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his house keys, and tossed them onto the passenger seat. They landed with a metallic thud on the floor mat. "Good luck, Clara," he said, though he didn't mean it. "I hope you find your spark too." He turned and walked toward the glass doors of the tower. He didn't look back. He didn't wave. He just walked into his abundance and left Clara sitting in a car that smelled of his betrayal. Clara sat there for a long time, watching the heavy glass doors. Her vision blurred. She felt small, discarded, and old. She looked at the keys on the floor, the keys to the home they had built, now reduced to a clean break. She shifted the car into drive and pulled away, her heart a hollow ache. She didn't know that under that very passenger seat, hidden in the dark crease of the upholstery, Mark had dropped something. A small, crumpled slip of paper he had forgotten the moment he stepped into the elevator to meet Chloe. He had walked away from 20 years. He had walked away from his wife. And he had unknowingly walked away from $150 million. 2 weeks had passed since Clara had watched Mark's back disappear into the shimmering glass of the downtown high-rise. 2 weeks of waking up on the left side of the bed and reaching for a warmth that wasn't there, only to remember, with a sickening jolt, that the warmth was now in a sleek, minimalist loft on the 34th floor. The house felt like a museum of a dead civilization. Every corner held a relic, the antique clock they bought in London, the rug they argued over for 3 hours at an estate sale, the empty space on the wall where Mark had ripped down a portrait of them at the firm's Christmas party. Clara, an architect by trade, found herself looking at her own home and seeing only failed structural integrity. The foundations of her life had crumbled, and she was wandering through the ruins. But on this particular Saturday, the lethargy broke. It started with the smell. She walked into the garage to get a bottle of wine from the cellar and caught a whiff of her SUV. It was faint, but it was there, a cloying, synthetic mix of Mark's heavy oud cologne and the lingering, powdery scent of Chloe's vanilla body spray. It had hitched a ride on Mark's clothes and seeped into the leather upholstery during that final, silent drive. It was the smell of betrayal. "Enough," Clara whispered to the empty garage. She didn't just need a car wash, she needed an exorcism. She went back inside, pulled on a pair of yellow rubber gloves, grabbed a heavy-duty vacuum, a bucket of citrus-scented soap, and a stack of microfiber cloths. She changed into an old college t-shirt and tied her hair back with a fierce, practical knot. This wasn't just cleaning, this was a demolition. She started with the trunk. She threw out a stray gym sock Mark had forgotten, an empty protein shake bottle, and a stack of legal briefs he'd left in the side pocket. She scrubbed the carpet until her arms ached, trying to erase the very memory of his luggage sitting there. Then came the passenger seat. This was the throne of the upgrade. This was where Mark had sat, smug and impatient, while she drove him to his new life. She pushed the seat as far back as it would go, the motor whining in the quiet garage. She got down on her knees on the floor mat, the vacuum roaring in her ear as she sucked up 2 weeks' worth of dust, crumbs, and gravel. The nozzle hit something solid. It made a sharp, clattering sound, like a marble being sucked into a plastic tube. Clara switched the vacuum off. Silence rushed back into the garage, heavy and expectant. She reached her gloved hand into the dark crevice between the seat and the center console, the no man's land where coins and French fries go to die. Her fingers brushed against something thin and papery. She pulled it out. It was a crumpled slip of paper, folded into a tight, jagged square. At first, she thought it was just a receipt for the alkaline water Mark had bought at the 7-Eleven. She was about to toss it into the trash bag when a flash of orange and blue caught her eye. She smoothed it out against her thigh. It wasn't a receipt. It was a Powerball ticket. Clara froze. The air in the garage suddenly felt very thin. She remembered that moment at the gas station, Mark laughing with the clerk, bragging about his high abundance cycle, and Chloe's manifesting. He must have tucked it into his pocket, and when he reached for his keys to toss them at her, the ticket must have snagged and fallen into the abyss of the seat tracks. She looked at the date. It was for the draw that had happened 2 days after he moved out. The one that had dominated the news for the last 10 days because the jackpot was an astronomical $150 million, and the winner had yet to come forward. No, she breathed. Life isn't this poetic. Life is a mess. It doesn't give you prizes for being cheated on. With trembling fingers, she peeled off her rubber gloves. Her hands were sweating. She reached into her back pocket for her phone, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She opened the official lottery app. The winning numbers were displayed in bold, glowing circles at the top of the screen: 12 to 24, 37 to 44, 65 and the Powerball 10. Clara looked at the ticket in her hand. 12 check. 24 check. 37 check. A cold chill washed over her, starting at the base of her neck and racing down her spine. Her vision blurred. She blinked, hard, and looked again. 44 check. 65 check. Her breath hitched. She was afraid to look at the last number. If this was a cruel joke from the universe, she didn't want to know yet. She wanted to stay in this moment for just 1 second longer, the moment where she wasn't just a divorced woman of a certain age, but a woman who could buy the skyscraper Mark lived in. She looked. Powerball, 10. The ticket fell from her hand, fluttering to the clean, citrus-scented floor mat. Clara didn't scream. She didn't jump. She simply sat back on her heels and stared at the concrete wall of her garage. $150 million. She thought of Mark's face when he told her he wanted a clean break. She thought of the quitclaim settlement he had practically forced her to sign, where he waived all rights to any property in her possession to ensure she couldn't come after his future legal earnings or his new life. He had been so terrified that she would take his money that he had legally barred himself from the greatest fortune he would ever see. He had left her for a younger woman, a spark, and an abundance. And in his haste to escape the dead weight of his marriage, he had dropped the keys to a kingdom in the dirt of her car. A slow, sharp smile spread across Clara's face, the first real smile in months. It wasn't a smile of joy, it was a smile of cold, architectural precision. She had been worried about the structural integrity of her life. The foundation was back. And this time, it was made of solid gold. Clara picked up the ticket, tucked it into her bra, and walked back into the house. She didn't finish cleaning the car. She didn't need to. The stench of Mark was gone, replaced by the intoxicating scent of a brand new world. She poured herself a glass of the expensive wine she'd gone to the cellar for, sat at her mahogany desk, and began to look up the best tax attorneys in the state. The upgrade was officially over. Her life was about to begin. Clara didn't sleep. The lottery ticket sat on her nightstand, weighed down by a heavy crystal paperweight, as if it might catch a stray breeze and vanish back into the ether from which it came. Every hour, she would click on her bedside lamp, squint at the numbers, and compare them to the screenshot on her phone. 12. 24. 37. 44. 65. Powerball, 10. Each time, the numbers remained the same. They didn't shift or blur. They were a mathematical certainty in an uncertain world. By 6 a.m., the adrenaline had settled into a hard, crystalline clarity. She didn't feel like a victim anymore. She felt like an architect looking at a blueprint for a skyscraper that everyone said was impossible to build. At 9 a.m. sharp, she pulled her SUV, the very vessel of her fortune, into the underground parking lot of a glass and steel monolith downtown. She wasn't going to the firm where Mark worked. She was going 3 blocks over, to the offices of Sterling and Vance. Sarah Vance had been Clara's roommate in college before she became one of the most formidable estate attorneys in the city. She was the kind of woman who wore Chanel suits like armor and could dismantle a person's life with a single, well-placed comma. "Clara," Sarah said, rising from her mahogany desk to embrace her. "I was going to call you. I heard about Mark. I'm so sorry, honey. If you need me to bury him in discovery for the next decade, just say the word. I'll do it for the sport of it." Clara sat down, her leather handbag gripped tightly in her lap. "Actually, Sarah, I'm not here for a divorce battle. Mark already took care of that." She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder. Inside was the quitclaim settlement Mark had shoved at her 2 weeks ago. He had been so proud of it, a fair and equitable distribution of assets that basically boiled down to, "I keep my future, you keep the past." Sarah scanned the document, her brow furrowing. He really was in a rush, wasn't he? He waived all rights to alimony, all rights to your architectural firm's future earnings, and this is the kicker: he signed a global release of tangible property. Clause 14.2, any and all personal property, assets, or effects remaining in the possession of either party at the time of signing shall be deemed the sole and exclusive property of said party, regardless of original purchase or intent. Sarah looked up, a wry smile on her face. He was so scared you'd try to claim a piece of his partnership buy-in or his new bachelor furniture that he essentially built a wall between your bank accounts. It's a clean break, all right. Brutally so. Clara took a deep breath. And what if I found something? Something he bought before he signed this, but didn't know he still had. Sarah leaned back, her eyes narrowing with professional curiosity. Like what? A hidden bank account? A classic car? Clara didn't speak. She reached into her bag again, pulled out a small plastic sleeve, and laid the Powerball ticket on the desk. The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah didn't move. She didn't blink. She reached into her drawer, pulled out a jeweler's loupe, and spent a full 3 minutes examining the ticket. Then, she pulled up the lottery results on her computer. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. It was the first time Clara had ever heard the woman sound breathless. "Clara, tell me exactly where you found this." "In the SUV. Under the passenger seat tracks. 2 days ago, while I was cleaning out the stench of him." Sarah began to laugh, a low, melodic sound that slowly built into a full-throat roar. She slapped the desk with her palm. "He did it? The arrogant, short-sighted idiot actually did it. Explain it to me, Sarah. Legally. I need to know it's mine." Sarah stood up and began to pace the length of her office, her mind working at lightning speed. "Okay, look. Mark bought this ticket. We can probably find the CCTV of him buying it at that 7-11. Usually, that would make it his asset. However, she pointed a sharp fingernail at the settlement on her desk. He signed this document after he abandoned the ticket in your vehicle. Abandoned? Legally, yes. He moved out. He removed his essential belongings. He chose what to take and what to leave. By leaving the ticket in a vehicle that is titled solely in your name and then signing a document that says everything in your possession belongs to you, he effectively gifted you $150 million without even knowing it. Sarah leaned over the desk, her eyes gleaming with a predatory light. Clause 14.2 is his coffin, Clara. He wanted to make sure that if you won the lottery or inherited money from your aunt, he wouldn't have to give you a dime of his legal salary. He was so focused on protecting his future that he didn't realize he had already lost his present. Because he didn't list the ticket as a disputed asset or shared property, and because it was found property in your exclusive domain, it's yours. All of it? Clara felt a weight lift off her shoulders so suddenly she felt lightheaded. He told me he wanted to take Chloe to Tuscany with the winnings. He told me he was in a high abundance cycle. The only thing he's in is a high irony cycle, Sarah quipped. But we have to be smart. If you claim this in your own name tomorrow, Mark's lawyers will file an injunction within the hour. They'll claim mutual mistake or fraudulent concealment. They'll lose, but they'll tie your money up in court for 5 years. So what do I do? We form a blind trust, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The Phoenix Rising Trust. I'll be the trustee. We claim the prize through the trust. The public and Mark will only see a nameless entity. By the time he figures out it's you, if he ever does, the money will be moved, reinvested, and shielded. He signed away his right to discovery when he signed that quitclaim. He wanted out of your life, Clara. Let's give him exactly what he asked for. Clara looked out the window, at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, in a glass tower 3 blocks away, Mark was likely sitting in a meeting, feeling like the king of the world because he'd finally shed the dead weight of his 20-year marriage. He was probably planning a dinner with Chloe, checking his bank balance, and feeling smug about his clean break. She felt a surge of pity for him, brief, sharp, and then gone. He had traded a woman who knew his soul for a woman who knew his gym schedule. He had traded a partner for a spark. And in his rush to ensure he didn't have to share his life with her, he had ensured he would never share her fortune. Form the trust, Sarah, Clara said, her voice steady. And one more thing. Anything. I want to make sure the first thing the trust buys is that beachfront property in Malibu we looked at for a project last year. The one Mark said was unrealistic for our budget. Sarah grinned. Consider it done. To unrealistic dreams, Clara. Clara walked out of the office and into the bright afternoon sun. For the first time in 20 years, she wasn't Mrs. Mark Sterling. She wasn't the architect's wife. She was the architect of her own destiny. And her new life was going to be very, very expensive. The headline on every news kiosk, digital billboard, and social media feed was the same: mystery winner claims $150 million Powerball via Phoenix Rising Trust. The city was obsessed. Who was it? A tech mogul? A lucky janitor? A syndicate of teachers? The Lottery Commission confirmed only that the ticket had been purchased in the metropolitan area and that the winner had opted for the lump sum payout, a staggering $85 million after taxes. Clara watched the news from a balcony she had dreamed of for a decade. The Malibu air was salt-heavy and cool, a stark contrast to the stagnant, humid air of the suburbs she had left behind. The house was a masterpiece of glass and cedar, perched precariously and perfectly over the Pacific. Technically, she was a tenant of the Phoenix Rising Trust, a legal layer Sarah Vance had insisted upon to keep Clara's name off any public records. She took a sip of chilled Sancerre and looked at her phone. She hadn't changed her number yet. She wanted to see if he would do it. She wanted to see how long it would take for the abundance to run dry. 3 blocks away from her old life, in a loft that was increasingly feeling like a gilded cage, Mark Sterling was staring at a stack of credit card statements. "Marky, look at this rug." Chloe chirped from the floor, where she was surrounded by silk cushions and expensive crystals. She held up her tablet, showing a hand-woven Persian silk piece that cost more than Mark's first car. "It has the perfect vibration for our meditation corner. It's all about inviting wealth into the space." Mark rubbed his temples. The spark he had felt 2 weeks ago was starting to feel like a recurring migraine. Chloe was beautiful, yes, but her beauty was high maintenance. She didn't work, she manifested. And apparently, manifesting required a constant stream of organic juices, $200 leggings, and spiritual retreats to Tulum. "Chloe, babe, maybe we hold off on the rug," Mark said, his voice strained. The move was expensive. The security deposit on this place was 3 months' rent, and my car detailing bill was substantial. Chloe pouted, a practiced expression that usually made Mark reach for his wallet. "But Mark, you said we were in an abundance cycle. You said the universe was opening up for us. Did you find that lottery ticket yet? The one you said was our Tuscany fund." The question hit Mark like a physical blow. The ticket. He had looked everywhere. He had emptied his designer suitcases 3 times. He had searched the pockets of every suit, every pair of jeans, even the trash can in his new kitchen. He remembered buying it. He remembered the clerk's yellow teeth and the smell of the 7-Eleven. He remembered tucking it into the pocket of his blazer while he was in Clara's SUV. A cold, sickening realization began to settle in his gut. I'm still looking for it," he lied. But his mind was racing. He remembered the drive. He remembered being annoyed by Clara's silence. He remembered reaching for his keys to toss them at her. The keys had been in the same pocket as the ticket. He waited until Chloe went to her sound bath session an hour later. The moment the door clicked shut, Mark grabbed his phone. His heart was hammering. It wasn't the heart rate of a man in love, it was the heart rate of a man drowning. He dialed Clara's number. It rang 3 times. 4. He was about to hang up when she picked up. "Hello, Mark," she said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. There was no anger, no resentment. She sounded like she was answering a call from a telemarketer. "Clara." "Hey," Mark said, trying to inject a note of casual warmth into his voice, the old charming husband routine. I was thinking about some of the things I left at the house. Some files, mostly. And I realized I might have dropped something in your car." "The SUV?" Clara asked. He could hear a faint sound in the background, the steady, rhythmic crash of waves. "Is she at a spa?" he wondered. "Yeah, the SUV. Look, this is going to sound silly, but I bought a Powerball ticket the day I moved out. I think it might have fallen out of my pocket while I was getting my bags out. Did you happen to find it while you were, cleaning?" There was a long pause. Mark held his breath. He could hear his own blood rushing in his ears. "I did clean the car, Mark," Clara said. "In fact, I spent 4 hours scrubbing it. I wanted every trace of you and your new life gone. It was quite a mess." Mark's grip on the phone tightened. "And? Did you find a slip of paper? It's probably crumpled. It's not worth anything if it's not the winning numbers, obviously, but I just have this nagging feeling." "I found a lot of things, Mark," Clara interrupted. "I found a gym sock. I found an old receipt for a jewelry store, the one where you bought Chloe's necklace while we were still married, I assume. And I found a lot of trash." "Trash?" "Clara, specifically, a lottery ticket." Blue and orange. Did you see it? Mark, she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice now, a sharp, cold edge that made his skin crawl. Do you remember what you told me when you dropped those keys? You said you wanted a clean break. You said you wanted everything in my possession to be mine, and everything in yours to be yours. You were very insistent on that quick claim settlement. Clara, don't be difficult. If you have the ticket. I don't have any trash in my car anymore, Mark. I told you, I cleaned it. I cleared out the old, dead weight to make room for my own abundance. Isn't that what you and Chloe call it? You threw it away. Mark's voice rose to a panicked shriek. You threw away a potential $100 million ticket because you were cleaning. I did exactly what you asked me to do, Clara said. I moved on. I took what was mine and I let go of what wasn't. If there was a ticket, it was abandoned property, wasn't it? Just like you abandoned 20 years of marriage for a spark. Clara, listen to me. No, Mark. You listen. You got your wish. You got the loft, you got the girl, and you got your clean slate. Don't call me again. I'm busy manifesting my own future, and it doesn't involve looking through the trash for yours. The line went dead. Mark stared at his phone, his face pale. He looked around the loft at the expensive crystals, the silk cushions, and the stack of bills. He thought of the Phoenix Rising Trust on the news. He thought of the timeline. A horrific, gut-wrenching thought crossed his mind. What if she didn't throw it away? But he looked at the settlement on his desk. He had drafted it himself. He had inserted the clauses to protect his future earnings from her. He had signed away his right to anything in her possession. Even if she had the ticket, it was hers. He had legally handed her the winning numbers and locked the door behind him. He sat down on the floor, burying his face in his hands. From the other room, his Alexa started playing Chloe's Abundance and Wealth Frequency playlist. The high-pitched ringing filled the room, sounding less like a blessing and more like a siren. A year is a long time in the world of architecture, but it is an eternity in the world of regret. Clara stood in the wings of the grand ballroom at the Pierre Hotel, adjusting the strap of her midnight blue silk gown. It wasn't just a dress, it was a statement of structural integrity. She looked in the mirror and didn't see the woman who had begged a man not to leave her in a suburban bedroom. She saw the woman who had just endowed a $10 million scholarship for underprivileged women in design. She saw the woman who had spent the last 6 months traveling the world not to find her spark, but to rediscover the fire she had smothered to keep Mark Sterling warm. Tonight was the Empowering Spaces Gala. Clara was the guest of honor. The Phoenix Rising Trust had become one of the most mysterious and generous patrons of the arts in the country, and Clara was its public face, the architectural consultant who moved with the grace of a woman who owed no one an explanation. As the applause swelled, Clara stepped onto the stage. The lights were blinding, but as her eyes adjusted, she scanned the crowd. And there, near the back, standing by the service entrance, she saw a ghost. Mark was there. He wasn't a guest, he didn't have a tuxedo that fit. He looked like a man who had been caught in a storm and hadn't quite dried out yet. His hair was thinner, his skin had a gray, sallow cast, and the confident, litigious swagger was gone, replaced by the hunched shoulders of a man who spent too much time looking at his bank balance. Clara delivered her speech with poise. She spoke about foundations, how they must be deep to withstand the wind, and how sometimes, the most beautiful buildings are those built on the site of a total demolition. She didn't look at Mark once while she spoke. She didn't have to. She could feel his gaze, heavy and desperate, like a weight she had long ago learned how to carry. When the gala moved to the cocktail hour, Clara found herself cornered near the bar. She was holding a glass of vintage champagne when the crowd parted, and Mark was suddenly there. "Clara," he whispered. His voice was raspy, stripped of its former courtroom authority. "Mark," she replied, her tone as polite as if she were speaking to a distant acquaintance she had met once at a wedding. I didn't realize you were on the guest list. I wasn't. A friend of a friend let me in, he stammered. He looked around the room, at the diamonds, the silk, and the power. You look incredible. I heard about the trust. I heard about the Malibu house. He paused, waiting for her to invite him into the conversation, to offer him a seat at the table he had walked away from. When she didn't, he forged ahead, his desperation leaking out like oil from a cracked engine. Chloe's gone, Clara. She left 6 months ago. She said the energy of our relationship had turned toxic. Turns out, manifesting only works when there's a credit card with a high limit to back it up. She took the espresso machine and the crystals. Left me with the lease on a loft I can't afford. Clara took a slow, deliberate sip of her champagne. Energy is a fickle thing, Mark. It tends to go where it's actually appreciated. Mark stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low, frantic hiss. It was you, wasn't it? The Phoenix Rising Trust. It was the ticket. You didn't throw it away. You found it under that seat, and you claimed it? Clara didn't flinch. She leaned in, her scent expensive, subtle, and entirely her own, filling the small space between them. Do you remember the quick claim settlement, Mark? The one you spent 3 nights perfecting? The one you said was for a clean break. Mark's jaw tightened. I was under stress. I wasn't thinking clearly. No, you were thinking very clearly, Clara corrected him gently. You were thinking about how to keep every penny of your future partnership from the dead weight of your wife. You wanted to make sure that if I ever tried to sue you for alimony, I wouldn't have a leg to stand on. You protected yourself so well, Mark, that you protected yourself right out of a fortune. It was my ticket. He hissed. I bought it. By law, that money should have been shared. By law, Clara said, her voice turning as cold as the ice in his empty glass, it was abandoned property in my vehicle. By the contract you wrote and you signed, it was an asset in my possession that you waived all rights to. You wanted a clean break, Mark. You wanted what's mine is mine. Well, this is mine. The house in Malibu? Mine. The trust? Mine. The life I'm living? Mine. She looked him up and down the cheap, off-the-rack suit, the tired eyes. You told me you wanted to take Chloe to Tuscany, Clara said softly. I went last month. I stayed at a villa that overlooked the valley. It was beautiful. I didn't think about you once. Not because I was angry, but because you simply didn't fit into the landscape anymore. Mark looked like he was about to cry, or perhaps scream. Clara, please. I'm in trouble. The firm, they didn't give me the partnership. They said my personal life was a distraction. I'm drowning in debt. Just $1 million. That's all I need. $1 million is nothing to you now. Clara set her champagne glass down on a passing tray. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small, rectangular object. Mark's eyes lit up with a sudden, pathetic hope. He thought she was reaching for a checkbook. Instead, she pulled out a business card for a reputable bankruptcy attorney Sarah Vance had recommended. She tucked it into the breast pocket of his cheap suit. I'm an architect, Mark, she said, her voice steady and final. I know when a structure is beyond repair. You didn't just leave me, you demolished the foundation of 20 years for a spark that went out the moment the wind blew. I don't owe you $1 million. I don't even owe you an apology. She turned to leave, but stopped for one last moment. Oh, and Mark? The 7-11 where you bought that ticket? I bought the land it stands on. I'm turning it into a community garden. I figured that spot had given enough luck to one person already. Clara walked away. She didn't look back to see him standing there, a small man in a large room, finally realizing that the upgrade he had chased had been a catastrophic downgrade. As she stepped out of the hotel and into her waiting car, the same SUV, now meticulously detailed and smelling only of fresh rain and leather, she looked at the city lights. She had won the lottery, yes. But the money was just the frame. She was the one who had finally painted the picture. The car pulled away from the curb, merging into the stream of lights. Clara leaned back in the seat, closed her eyes, and for the first time in her life, she didn't just feel lucky. She felt free.